and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted and Unchoreographed. Today I am very excited to have the one, the only Patrice Bowler. So, Patrice, how did you start off in this wonderful world of the arts industry?
So, I come from a performing arts family from the west coast of Canada, and literally my first production, I was in my mother's womb. She was about 6 months pregnant doing this show, and there I was, gracing the stage with my presence. And the second time when I was on stage, I was about 6 months old doing a very similar show, but obviously as a little baby. I'm not sure how they navigated that with, diapers and crying, but hey, we love that in the arts, the improvisation. So yeah, my family, on my mom's side, they were from California, and my grandma and grandpa were musicians, and they raised this little cohort of performers, and so all of my aunts and uncles and my mom all are musical, and they would do family shows. And then in 1970, when the Vietnam War was happening, my grandparents and family were also very political, and they were so furious about what was happening in the States. So they packed up the kids and moved to Canada, this little island called Salt Spring Island, 18 miles long, population of a few thousand people, primarily hippies. And of course, the first thing they did when they moved to the island was they decided to write a show about the history of the island because they knew so much about it. So they spent like 6 months researching the history of Salt Spring, building a house in the forest, and then they put this show on for the locals, and basically became this sort of staple in the community on Salt Spring Island. And to this day, my mom is sort of still like waving the Newman family flag, and she still produces shows. We have this, it's sort of our legacy show, which is called A Christmas with Scrooge, and it is a musical version of A Christmas Carol, and my grandparents wrote a bunch of original numbers, and I played almost every character in that show that I could. Started as a guest at the Fezziwig Ball, primarily a little puppy. I played Tiny Tim for a number of years until I started to develop, and then we thought maybe I'd start playing a girl. I played a Fezziwig daughter, the oldest Cratchit daughter, Martha. And then I actually went back when I was 27, and I played Belle. But yeah, so the show still continues. But what's so great about it is that it has a cast of about 70 people. So, anybody who wants to be in it essentially can be, and they come in as a caroler, or they come in the street scene, or a pickpocketer. And so for a long time it was my grandma, my grandpa directing and musical directing these shows, and then my grandpa passed away, and my mom sort of moved into the role with my grandma, so they were steering the ship together. And then my grandma passed away, and the show actually didn't happen for a number of years. Sort of, I guess just pre-pandemic, my mom started to do the show again with a different woman playing the piano, which was really exciting because my grandma had always musical directed it. So yeah, they do it every year. It's still got such an amazing following on the island and so much support. And I'll still, when I go home to visit, I'll see people on the street, and people I don't know, and they'll be like, "Oh, I remember seeing you in Christmas with Scrooge back when you were 3 years old." I'm like, okay. So that was it. I've been performing since before I could walk. And so from sort of the ages of baby to 17, I was performing in shows with my family. We did lots of dinner theater shows and cabarets. And then I went to high school and, took every sort of performing arts class that I could. I was doing dance, and I was doing improv and choir and acting, and I was even doing visual arts because I just, it was just in my blood. In hindsight, should I have taken a second language? Yes. Would that serve me now? Yes. But no, I was like, I'm gonna do visual arts for 4 years, and I paint a picture maybe once every 5 years. But there you go. I really loved it. So yeah, that was it. I don't think that there was really an option for me not to be in the arts, probably because childcare is so expensive. So my after school curriculum, extracurriculars, were just going to dance class with my mom. And my sister is also an amazing artist as well. And so she works primarily as an actor and musician. She's an amazing singer. and dancer. And then I kind of started to move towards the creative side of theater at quite a young age. I really loved performing. I always thought it was super fun, but I never got that kind of like, I don't know, feeling that it was the thing. You know, it was like the thing that your heart beats for. I loved to sing and run around the stage, but I remember choreographing a tap dance in high school to a bunch of non-tappers, and it was such a mess. Like it was a hot mess. We were all in jeans and black leotards. We all had matching bow ties, and it was so fun. And even though you couldn't hear a single step in like coordination, like I just loved teaching that dance. And so that kind of, I would say, was like the seedlings of what sort of began the rest of my professional career.
You grew up in Von Trapp family.
Totally. And I have Maria's haircut. So, you know, I used to have this yellow dress that looked like when I put it on, they're like, Julie Andrews, is that you? Like I was literally called Julie Andrews, and I thought I will never get a better compliment. And then somebody told me I looked like Jamie Lee Curtis. I had such an incredibly privileged childhood, you know, just growing up, doing theater, dancing. And if I wasn't doing that, I was just playing in the forest, like building forts and like, you know, attacking the boys in my school with sticks. And like it was, you know, in summertime, working on farms, like throwing bales of hay around and swimming in the ocean and swimming in lakes. And just, you know, Salt Spring Island is absolute paradise. Like when I go back now and I bring friends over who've never been there, it's such a wonderful way to see the place, because you know, you go, oh yeah, the West Coast of Canada, it's beautiful. And then seeing it through someone else's eyes, they're like, what is this? It's an extraordinary place. And I'm just so lucky that that's where my family decided to relocate to escape, you know, the confines of a political catastrophe happening in the States.
I was gonna ask, just because you were saying like in high school you did like dance, theater, visual arts, like could you explain to maybe people who are listening, like what does the education system at high school level look like in Canada? Like can you do all those things in high school?
Yeah. So, I mean, some of them are extracurricular. Improv and choir were extracurricular. But basically, you just have to, like, there are the essential courses, like in, let's see, grade, oh my God, it's been so long. Grade 6, that's 11. So, oh my God, I'm like trying to remember. So long ago, Nate. So grade 9 would have been my first year at high school. So I was 14 years old. And so you had to do like math, science, physical education, and English and social studies. And so you had to learn a bit of like history of the world, history of Canada. You had to learn a bit of biology, a bit of chemistry, a bit of physics. You had to learn, you know, a little bit of calculus, a little bit of algebra, and then you'd study Shakespeare and read some books. And then basically, other than that, you could any other like free courses or free slots, you could just take what was on offer. So a lot of them were artistic. So there was, you know, visual arts in terms of like painting and drawing, or you could do like multimedia. So working, you know, with computers, which I did not do. And it is evident even to this day. I am so tech challenged. And then, so we had drama class, we had dance, we had, I think there was like extra phys ed classes you could do, but I was like, I'm dancing all the time. I don't need that. And then you could take languages. So you could take French, Spanish, I think even Japanese. I think we had a Japanese teacher. And then there were, once you got to like grade 11 and 12, so 16, 17, you got even more free classes, because what you had to do, so you had to take sort of like a liberal arts class. You had to take, you know, some sort of either history, law, BC First Nations, which I did take that class. It was the first year that it was introduced. It was all about history of the Indigenous peoples in Canada, but specifically, you know, people who lived in British Columbia before colonization. Or you could take, I took almost every class that had to do with history because I loved it. And I took the bare minimum of math and sciences because I did not have a knack for it and I didn't like to not be good at something. I also took like every sort of English class that I could. And then, yeah, every performing arts class, which again, like my mom is the most amazing woman. She is just the absolute best. But could she have maybe been a little bit more strict and said, here, Patrice, I know you love to be good at the arts and history, but maybe you should take a language. I'm just saying. Like, you're going to get into the world, and maybe you're going to want to travel or live somewhere abroad, and maybe that place isn't an English speaking country, and wouldn't it be nice to know another language? Would I have listened? I don't know, but that is my one regret about high school, is that I did not. I've been on Duolingo learning Spanish for like 17 years. I'm like, am I better? I don't know. But yeah, I would say my, the education system in British Columbia, it's really different all over Canada, and so I couldn't speak to more than, in British Columbia, like what we had to learn. There was like a certain amount of classes you had to take, but then once you got older, those classes, they were really encouraging us to kind of find ourselves and give us options. And it was kind of amazing how much was on offer. The fact that we could do a law class, and which I took, and you'd like went over to Victoria, which is our capital city in British Columbia, and we got to like go to the law courts and like watch like the real thing in action. It was pretty cool. And I think that that's also part of growing up on a small island, is they wanted to give us opportunities to engage with, the bigger picture and the bigger world. And so there were a lot of amazing. We had a lot of field trips even into our, later education. So I mean, I think that the high school on Salt Spring, GISS, is incredible. And my acting teacher, it was his first year teaching, Jason Donaldson, and he's still there. He's honestly one of the people who has inspired me most. Like, such an incredible teacher, such incredible like pedagogic practices, but also so fun and so supportive. And just what was really great at my school was, because we were such a small community, and actually, I'm going on such a tangent here, but bear with me. I'm from Salt Spring Island, but it's part of the Southern Gulf Islands. So it's a whole cluster of islands, and the other islands don't have a high school on them. And so all those other children from the other islands would get picked up in the morning on a little like ferry boat, a little like sea bus, and brought to Salt Spring Island. And then at the end of the day, they'd be taken home. So we had about 600 kids in our high school, but maybe 300 of us were from Salt Spring and the rest were from other islands. But anyway, we were such a small community, and Facebook was just kind of starting when I was in high school. And so cyberbullying was a very interesting thing to navigate, because it was it was new to me. But like, I didn't sort of have this typical or stereotypical high school experience where, people really only did what they were good at. Like, you only had, like the jocks or the science nerds or the theater nerds. Like, everyone kind of did everything. Like, we had a lot of people who were on, our basketball team who were in drama class, and you had people who were, in dance class, but also, taking extracurricular like science courses. And it was really interesting. There just was like a really good sort of blend, just that it wasn't always just the same people together, and you had people really exploring their interests. And because we were encouraged to, which I think is like very, I don't know, proactive of that school. Hopefully that's still the case, and that it was happening across the rest of the country. But I just do feel like we had such a fulsome, we just had a lot offered, and you could just like you could really try to pursue many different avenues.
That's amazing, because as well, like, you're a small island off the coast of like Canada, which is so big. Like, could you explain maybe how that was, as like, and maybe that's why, like, you were offered so much, but you're still such a tiny little island. Was there an art scene on the different little islands? Did you get a chance to see like theater shows in the mainland of Canada? Is that the correct word?
We have like a lot of community spaces where productions happen on Salt Spring. And there are several community theater groups that put on plays and concerts, and we have lots of choirs. We have gumboot dancing, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's people in like wellies slapping them and like jumping around the stage, and it's kind of like tap dancing but in wellies. It's the best. Anyways, everybody wears like a tie-dye shirt and shorts and wellies and just like slaps their boots. It's great. So there's a lot happening on Salt Spring and on the other islands. There's a lot of tons of like visual artists as well. I mean, the landscape is so rich and plentiful, and like it really attracts visual artists. So we have lots of potters and painters and jewelers, and we have this amazing Saturday market, which has been going since long before I was born, and it runs from like March to November. Like they just like they stick it out into like the bitter end of when it starts snowing. But it's like farmers market on absolute crack. Like it is massive, and it's like you've got where Salt Spring's also known for being like there are lots of farms and lots of like we have old growth apple trees, and so I mean we've got we've got vineyards and cideries and so many farms, and we have a brewery, and we just have a little bit of everything. And so a lot of Salt Springs really become a destination from people from the mainland for like a weekend getaway because it's just so beautiful and there's so much to do. But we do have one theater that was like a purpose-built theater that opened, I think, when I was 9. And if I'm not wrong, oh my God, I'm going to say it, it's going to be wrong. Anyways, who's fact checking? I'm pretty sure that A Christmas with Scrooge may have been one of the first productions in that new theater when it opened. But many groups from off island, like we've had like Ballet BC, and we've had international groups come to play at our spring, which is really great. Just to have a bunch of different people coming to our little island. Obviously, it is hard to be a performing artist on Salt Spring and to have a career of it just because 18 miles long, 13,000 people. So there are a few people who are living the dream and they're working as full-time artists on Salt Spring, and it's amazing. But most people tend to either move to Victoria, which is a half an hour ferry boat away, or which is on Vancouver Island, so yet another island a bit bigger, or they go to Vancouver, which is sort of the biggest city in British Columbia. It's third biggest city in Canada. And so that's where people will go to train. They'll go and start their careers there, maybe end up back on Salt Spring at some point. But that's, there are a number of theater companies in both Victoria, Vancouver. And so if you do want to see like a lot of art and a lot of theater, you would leave Salt Spring to go and do that. And that's what I did after graduating high school. I moved to Victoria first with my best friend, Hallie Fulford. Hallie, if you're listening, I love you. we moved to this house in Victoria, and I was in this weird thing where I think I thought that I was going to be a dancer. I was like, you know what, I love theater, but I really love dance. I was really getting into contemporary dance. I was taking, like so many classes, and I was getting up at 4 a.m. to work my bakery job, and then I was like running off to dance class, like shoes in my bag, and it was all very, very cool. And it was hard. And then I went on a trip with my family to Cuba, and I did a little bit of traveling. Like I'd gone to Mexico with my sister and my dad. Went on this trip to Cuba, and it kind of changed my life, where I thought, I just want to travel. I love traveling so much. And so I left Victoria because I could like not afford to save any money between going to full-time dance classes and my bakery job. So and then I really just made an effort of like I would do theater contracts and then like spend big chunks of the year traveling. The thing about it as well, being from Canada, is that like second biggest country in the world. Canada is so big, and it is diverse. Like we have, in terms of like landscapes, we have so many different landscapes. It is such a beautiful country, and there's so much to see. But it's only quite recent where you could get cheaper tickets, like a flight from Vancouver to Toronto for like $80. When I was in high school and my early 20s, it was like $600 round trip. And so you had this kind of option, like, do I go to Toronto or do I go to Mexico? And I was like, I want to see the world. And so I think a lot of people in Canada just like want to see something new. And it's something, having now lived in the UK kind of on and off for 5 years, and having Europe so close by, and having these kind of vastly different landscapes, different languages, different cultures. Like you can be, in 3 different countries in one day that are completely different from one another. And I think that it's just a very different mindset. Traveling is very different, I think, to Canadians than to people who live in or near Europe, because of that sort of access and, cheap flights and just being able to be like, I'm just doing the weekend in Italy. Whereas getting anywhere, like in Canada, it's like that same flight is just over to Alberta from British Columbia, which is fine. But it's like, I think people really save up to do these like mega trips because they want to like see something very different than, what we're used to back home.
So when you were traveling and kind of doing theatre contracts and such, what kind of work were you making, or where were you making it? Like when you were in Victoria, you were like really focused on being a dancer.
Because I'm not a very good dancer. What I lack in technique, I make up in vigor and the love of it. But I just like I've never had amazing technique, you know. I've had back problems since I was a kid. Like I had scoliosis growing up and now I have disc issues. So like I just like injure myself all the time. I've got, you know, a left ankle that's hanging on by like one ligament. But I also just like I never loved sort of um like the dance community. I found it to be very competitive and I found it to be, yeah, I don't know. When I would go to dance auditions and I just never felt like I was in the right place, you know. I was always having such a great time, but it was like, you know, you're trying to have like fun with the people around you. You're connecting through like sweating and breathing, and they're all like, no, I gotta get the gig. Like, God, I hope I get it. And I was just like, I'm just happy to be here. So while I loved dance, I realized like I loved to teach it and I loved to create choreography, but that I was never going to be like traveling the world as a dancer, mostly because of my lack of technique and skill. But also, I just realized is like, this isn't, my body is in such rough shape and it's really takes its toll. And yeah, what I ended up doing is I got this gig through my aunt who was running a theater in like northern British Columbia in the mountains in this historic gold rush town. And I'd gone there as a kid because my sister had worked there and my mom had worked there. It's called Barkerville. It's sort of the reason that British Columbia is a province. And I won't go into the history of it, but it's very important to British Columbia as a province. Again, like just to touch on the fact that this is all within, you know, the lens of colonialism, which sucks. But it's a substantial place, and it, you know, it's still a place where people are mining for gold. But there is this beautiful historic town there, and there's a theater. And so my aunt was running the theater, and I was 18 years old, and I had just gone to Cuba, and I loved it. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was like, I like being in Victoria because I get to be with my best friend, but also like I'm just working so hard just to make ends meet. And she offered me a job to be like front of house at this theater in the middle of the mountains. And so every day I go to work and I wear my, you know, 1860s gold rush costume and I'd sell tickets and I'd seat people in the theater. And because, you know, we were family and I also did performing, I would, you know, run up on stage and like do a tap dance and like run back into the audience. It's Barkerville is essentially like summer camp for adults. It is so debaucherous and so fun. You like go and work for, you know, an 8-hour day, just like doing theater and pretending to be living in the, you know, 1860s. And then after work, you go hike a mountain and then you go to the pub. Like it is such an amazing place. And when I was living there, there was no cell service and no Wi-Fi, just like unless you were in your house. Well, there was no cell service ever, but there was no Wi-Fi unless you were in your house. So like you left the house and you just were completely disconnected. And it's one of the most beautiful places because it's surrounded by mountains. It's kind of at the beginning of the Rocky Mountains. And so yeah, we would just spend our summer. So I got to like get paid to work in theater. All of my free time was spent just like hiking and canoeing on lakes, and I was living in a house full of actors and we all became best friends and fell like desperately in love with each other. I like literally met two of my best friends, Pia and Marshall McMahon. You know, I was, you know, an honorary sister bridesmaid at their wedding, and like, you know, they've become total family. But that town, talk about, you think Salt Spring's small, that town has 200 people in it year round. It's a tiny town. And so what I would do is I'd go and work in Barkerville. And so the first year I worked in the theater in front of house. Second year I worked as a street actor. So I was like on the street doing town tours and teaching little discourses and doing scenes, just making the town feel lively. The third year I worked in the schoolhouse as like the school teacher. And then, and so what I'd do is I'd work there for 5 months, and your rent would be pennies and you're not really spending any money except for to go to the pub because, you know, like there's 2 restaurants. And so I'd actually save money. And so I'd spend, you know, a few months traveling. And so it was kind of an incredible gig. just in terms of supporting my love of theater and growing as an artist, and then also being able to see the world. And then I took some time off because, I missed being on the West Coast in the summertime because it's kind of the best time to be there. It's not pouring with rain as it starts to rain on my window right now. And then I ended up going back. I went back and I worked as a performer in the theater. So I was on the stage singing, dancing, acting. And then the next year I actually went and 2 years later, I went back and I directed the shows at the theater and choreographed the shows at the theater. So it's kind of amazing. It was very full circle where I started out, 18 years old, front of house, and then went back when I was 26 and got to do my directorial debut of these shows at the theater. And it's just an amazing theater because, it's over 100 years old and it's got like trapdoors and it's an incredible place to make art. And God, Barkerville is a really special place. It's amazing. And it's just like this very fulsome site. You got to have so many actors employed there every summer, and they're teaching people how to like pan for gold. And they're teaching people about the history of the place. They're playing judges and teaching you about like the judicial system in British Columbia in the 1860s. And so, we were just like tons of actors let loose playing dress up, and it was great.
So you went back and you were directing. So then how did you, well, I suppose I can kind of see it like you were choreographing as well as directing. So is that how movement directing kind of came into your life? You were kind of organically doing it already?
Yeah, so my last year working in Barkerville, so I would have been 21, not my last year before I took a break. I was 21, I was working in the schoolhouse, and on once a month we'd host these cabarets because there was basically none of us lived in Barkerville. We lived in the neighboring town of Wells, and which also has a history of being a gold rush town back in the 1930s. And so great because you could leave your house, walk over to your friend's house, which was maybe 5-minute walk, just like with a bag of groceries, and be like, hey, do you want to make dinner? And chances were they did. Or you just show up at the pub, see who shows up, and end up having a great night playing pool with, whoever was the first one to arrive. But they have a beautiful historic theater there as well. So there are two theaters in between the two towns. And so we would do this monthly cabaret. And so I met a woman named Fairlith Harvey who was running this nerdlesque theater troupe in Vancouver. And we became pals, and she said, I'm going to create a show about basically a Star Wars parody. It's going to be the first movie, but we're going to do a bunch of gender swap characters. We are going to have a bunch of, burlesque numbers, but so it will be the play, but with parody burlesque numbers. Do you want to help choreograph it? And I was like, yes, I love Star Wars. I love burlesque. I'd never done burlesque like properly. I'd like done a number from, Gypsy, pretending I was a burlesque performer. And so I did. So I hopped onto this project with the company Geekenders, and it would get to the part like of the dance where we'd have to take our bras off. And I would just go, so I don't know the best way to do. I mean, I know how I take my bra off, but maybe you all know a better, like sexier way for the show. And so it was kind of learning by doing. And I worked with that company on and off for 6 years and created, I think I tallied at one time, like over 70 dances for them. And we do these big parody burlesque shows. And they were like, it's called nerdlesque because it's kind of taking from popular culture. So we did like all the Star Wars films. We did Labyrinth. We did like we do Harry Potter. We actually never did a full on like Harry Potter movie burlesque, but we do these sort of cabaret style shows where there was like a theme. So Harry Potter would be the theme, or Lord of the Rings would be the theme. We did like a Portal 2 musical and a Jurassic parody, the musical, and what we did was the Wizard of Braz, and it was doing that first show, Star Wars: A New Hope, where I talked about the seedlings from, teaching a tap dance when I was 16 and loving that process of choreography so much, and choreographing dances for A New Hope. I was like, oh, something's happening. The thing that I think I'm supposed to be feeling about theater that like makes my like heart like explode out of my chest was happening. And I remember, God, I'm such a bad dancer. I would never teach the proper names for the dance steps. And so like we did like this step touch, and like kind of go around the world with our hands. And I would just go, Dancy, 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 dancy. And I remember on opening night of the show, everyone on stage was doing this step, and then they all like audibly went dancy, 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 and I just like burst into tears. I was like, oh my god. So yeah, so I stayed with the company for many years and was performing a bit. I was usually in the ensemble. I played a few lead roles, but I actually just really loved doing the choreography, and I felt such, I don't know, it just really it ignited something in me. And I was doing choreography for other shows as well with other companies. And then my one of my best friends, Corey Payette, who I was talking about, who I met in Barkerville, he's this incredible playwright. He's artistic director of Urban Inc. in Vancouver. He's a composer, one of the most beautiful voices you'll ever hear, an actor. And he had written a musical called Children of God, which actually is on in Vancouver right now. And my sister is in it. And they opened a few nights ago. It's very exciting, but it's all about residential schools in Canada. And he's an Indigenous man. And so he writes these incredible musicals centered around Indigenous culture and starring Indigenous performers. And they're just these epic, beautiful pieces of work. And he co-wrote a musical called Les Filles du Roi, which means Daughters of the King. And it was about the women who came over from France in the 1600s to Quebec to kind of populate the new world, and then arrived in Canada. And there's all these other people there, and they're like, wait, what? And so it's this kind of incredible story told in 3 languages: English, French, and Ganingaha, which is a dialect of Mohawk. And so he asks me, he says, Patrice, would you like to be the movement director of this show? And I said, yes. And then I went home and I was like, what is a movement director? I know what a choreographer is because that's what I've been doing. It's got to be the same thing. It is not. It is not. And so again, I feel like so much of my career has been like really learning on the job. But that was like my first credit as a movement director. And while we were working with musical theater performers primarily, it was definitely a different way into the movement of the piece. There were these dance influence sequences, but also sequences that were more like connecting to embodiment and breath. And I had to kind of let go of this like showing up with a dance choreographed and just be a bit more in the moment and just kind of utilizing what was being offered by those actors. And I just loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is really good. Like this, like I love doing choreography, but this is really good. And so I would, if someone asked me to choreograph a show, I mean, I don't know why they would. It'd be weird for them to, but I would still do it because I do love choreography. I think it's really fun, but I find so much more satisfaction personally with the creative and collaborative process that has come from my movement directing practice. And I know everyone's practice is so different, but you know, I'm doing this MFA in movement directing and teaching at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and it is really, you know, pulling a lot of questions out of me, and I've had to really, especially from a pedagogic perspective, like analyze my methods of teaching, knowing that my practice for so many years was as a choreographer, and it's very different to be a choreographer and a movement director. When you're working with dance steps, you're always working with a time constraint when you're working on a production, but choreography is all about, okay, like 5, 6, 7, 8, okay, learn the steps, learn the steps, learn the steps, and then we'll start to add in the emotion and all that stuff. But it's like right now we sort of like, and it's all very fast paced. It's very high energy. It's very, you know, and I do have to speak individually for my own practice. That is how I have taught. And there's joy and it's fun. And, you know, if someone has an idea, we'll toss that in. Like it can be very collaborative, but it is so much about like, okay, we are doing something in unison. It has to look a certain way for the storytelling. And with movement directing, it's so much about, you know, feeding ideas and eliciting the storytelling from the actor and kind of giving them the tools to create the movement themselves. Sometimes, obviously, I'm creating a movement number that has steps and whatnot, but it's so much more varied than that. And I just really loved that. I loved that I could like sit and watch a body and it's moving and not have to go, okay, but the step is, but actually go, okay, like, great, you made this offer. Let's explore that. That was really good. And it helps me become a better teacher and practitioner because I don't have all the answers. I don't want to have all the answers. It's way more interesting when I don't have all the answers. So yeah, so I've just like, I think that I'm really grateful for the experience I've had as a choreographer, and it gives me the opportunity to work in a really particular way and work on a number of different kinds of productions. But yeah, the movement directing definitely.
Because obviously before the MFA, you were already movement directing, you had credit, and you were kind of already organically doing it. So what made you decide, I'm going to do this course?
Yeah, I think I got to a point. So this maybe is not super fair to say of Canada, but just in my own experience, I found that movement direction wasn't a very well-known practice. And so like I was kind of making it up as I was going to what I thought a movement director was, which involved, some choreography, but also involved embodiment. And, it is what we are practicing, in the UK on the course. But it was really hard to like find other movement directors and like kind of like find that mentorship. And I got to a point in my practice where, so I'm very naughty, I didn't go to post-secondary. um I was really lucky. I started working in Barkerville when I was 18, and I was getting acting gigs and performing gigs, and I was able to just do the things that I loved, and I was learning by doing. I tried getting into two schools. One of the auditions was so bad, I'm not surprised they did not admit me into the school. Another reason that I don't perform very much, I am a terrible auditioner. Great at interviews, so bad at auditioning. I'm just like the second audition I had, I thought went quite well, but it was actually for an acting course, and I'm really glad I didn't get in because it wouldn't have been right for me. But it did really shake my confidence. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm just like a bad artist. I just can't seem to get into school, yet this is all I've ever known. All I've known is theater. But why won't these theater schools take me? And I was like, it's not because I'm too good. That's not it. It was really challenging because a lot of people wouldn't take me seriously in Canada because I didn't have the credentials. They, look at my CV and be like, well, where did you study? And I literally spoke to a director who said, if I see that someone has not gone to school, even if they're amazing in the audition, I will not cast them because I don't think that they're serious about it. And I was like, but what about all the very poor artists who can't afford? Anyways, that's a whole other ordeal. So I was working in Canada, and I was working with Corey a lot on his projects. I worked up at Caravan Farm Theatre, an amazing theater farm, 80 acres. They do several shows a year. And I worked as a movement director for their big outdoor Walk of Terror, which is essentially a large scale haunted house. It's incredible. And then went back up and worked on Corey at Marshall McMahon and Renata Arlick's show, Sedna, which is about a sea goddess, an Inuk sea goddess. And the show was basically the audience sits on these sleighs and they get taken around the farm, and we would just chase them around with our puppets, and with like the actors would like run on ahead, and they get to see this show in different areas of the farm. It was amazing. This is really a very poignant project for me, and I'll get back to this later. I was getting around BC. I was working, but I felt like I wasn't, my movement and my choreography was a bit, I'd like kind of gotten as far as I could with the tools that I had, and I was really desperate for some mentorship. And there's no movement directing course, post-secondary course in Canada thus far. And also I couldn't go and do a master's in Canada without a bachelor's. You cannot apply for post-secondary unless you have a bachelor's, which is totally ridiculous to me, considering that you could have done a bachelor's in like engineering and then go and do a master's in theater directing. But me, as a theater practitioner for my whole life, could not apply for a master's. So I started looking outside of the country, and I was like, well, where else? And then I'd heard about the movement directing and teaching course. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds pretty darn good. And when I read about the course, literally I just said, this is for me. This is it. This is for me. And I was going to apply, and then the pandemic happened, and I thought, I think I will wait. I think I'll wait. And so when things were trying to open up again, I did. I applied from Canada, and I ended up having to apply. I had an original audition date that I had to postpone because my back had gone out. And Vanessa Ewan and Aisha Tashkaran, who are the leaders of the course, they were very generous and said, yep, no problem. We'll see you in a month. And so a month later, I submitted my audition. They got back to me saying they wanted to have an interview with me. And I had my interview through Zoom and got accepted to the course. And like, I never want to say that, that my career is dependent on schooling. I think school is amazing and wonderful, but I know it is not accessible to everyone. But there was something deep within me by being rejected from these theater schools when I was younger, that getting accepted to a course that I was so excited about, I was so interested in, I just wanted it so bad, and then to be accepted, it definitely, like, yeah, it was very emotional. So it's been really interesting because being in the UK, movement direction is a really established art form. And even like I had a friend visiting me last summer and I said I was doing this course, and he's from Canada, and he said, "Oh, so choreography." I said, "No, it's movement directing." And he works in theater in Canada, and there is still a lot of uncertainty about what movement directors do and what it actually is in Canada. And so it's really exciting to be a movement director in a place where there's so much access to other movement directors, and like you just talk about what you do and people totally get it. They just like, yeah, yeah, totally. It's so exciting. And so yeah, this course has just like has cracked me open. It has cracked me open in how I want to continue working parts of my practice that I think are underdeveloped, that need more work. Like, for instance, teaching. I'm currently on attachment with Sue Mythen at the Lear, and it's been so incredible because this is a part of my practice that is really underdeveloped. I've never worked in a university style setting before. The teaching I've done has been like dance and musical theater and, kind of short course style or workshops on the weekends. So just to see like curriculums of movement be taught to actors and to see them, like the same actors every day for many months, it's so different than being in the rehearsal room. Yeah, I'm just having an absolute ball. But yeah, this course has definitely just really affirmed things within my practice, and also given me many tools that I definitely was looking for. I was really looking for that mentorship, and I was really looking to connect with other movement directors. And I think that that's actually been maybe one of the best things that has come out of this, are the friends and colleagues that I have, but also getting the feedback from those other people in the class, because you might get feedback and everyone's practice is so different. It's something you would have never thought of. And maybe you don't use it for 10 years, but then you do this one project and then you can use that feedback. But just being able to hear so many different voices where you all love the same thing, but you're approaching it from so many different angles, it's so helpful.
How would you define your practice as an artist?
Yeah. God, it is hard, but it's good. It is a good question because, a lot of people ask you that, and you're like, I don't know. I just like roll around on the floor and I hope that people want to join me. Tiny side quest. When I was working at Caravan Farm Theater, it was my first time working with large scale puppets. Um, and puppetry was always something that, I mean, like as a kid, we had so many like sock puppets and hand puppets, we do puppet shows for, the family. Well, they were doing it with us, really. But I'd been so interested in puppetry for so long, and then I got to do this show about this sea goddess puppet. It was amazing. And then when I moved to Scotland, I went on a Tier 5 youth mobility visa for 2 years, and I saw that there was a job posting for a show about a giant sea goddess puppet, and I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So I basically just said, "Hi, I have to be doing this show. Like, this is for me. This show is for me. Like, I've already done it in Canada." And it was for this company called Vision Mechanics in Edinburgh. Kim and Simon, who run the company, they're just such incredible puppeteers and artists. And we toured this gigantic sea goddess puppet. Was she 30 feet tall? To all over the country, and she's bringing awareness about ocean health. And it just kind of reestablished that like deep love for puppetry. And it's been one of the most kind of monumental projects to me for so many reasons. As a result, I didn't know what I was going to be writing my dissertation about at school, but I knew that I wanted puppetry to be involved somehow. And it's actually become like the focus of my dissertation, where I'm analyzing, how puppetry can be used to help create ensemble in actor movement directing and training. And so I ended up doing a project last summer in Yorkshire, up in Wakefield, with Trigger, called The Hatchling, and the director is Mervyn Miller, and we worked with these giant dragons, and there were 36 puppeteers, so many puppeteers. It was incredible. But it's just so interesting. Like, puppetry has become a really big part of my practice, but kind of accidentally. Like, it was never something I was really seeking, and yet has become so important to me. And I think that there's, specifically large scale puppetry. Like, I've made one marionette. She's very cute. Have no idea how to operate her, but I have made her. But like, I just find that there's something about ensemble that has always been really important to me. And, when I was doing choreography, I was often gifted the big, finale, or the big numbers in the show that involved the entire cast. And there is something very, very integral to my practice that sort of revolves around ensemble. So when I think about my practice, like, I would say I'm a multi-disciplinary artist. Here I'm about to get a master's in movement, but I don't really know what that means because I've never felt like a master at anything. And I think even when I have the piece of paper, assuming I get it, I don't even know if then I will feel like a master at it. I do really feel multidisciplinary. I feel like there's so much that I integrate into the projects that I work on. The newest sort of art form I've really taken on is intimacy coordination. Well, no, that is such a lie. Intimacy directing. And once I complete this course at Central, I do want to get my certification, because I've just been doing sort of small scale intimacy work and coaching. But I'd love to have that be, a bigger part of my practice, because I just think it's so important, and B, just so fun. Like, it is, I just think that when, consent is woven into the foundation of what you're doing, and people are on board and feel comfortable, so much beauty can come out of, like, a simple kiss, or, a touch, or, even when you get to simulated sex. Like, it is a big part of, well, especially film industry right now. Like, we're like, let's go there. And you can tell when people are having a bad time. So I really do latch on to multidisciplinary artist that uses puppetry and movement and dance and immersive theater as big parts of my creative process. But I also think that consent-based practice is a big part of my process. And when I started learning about intimacy directing years ago, and like the sort of principles of intimacy directing, I was like, oh, hey, I do that. Yay. I'm so relieved. And then also, collaboration is super important to me. Collaborative devised work. Like, I tend to primarily work on shows that are brand new, that are, being built now, here and now. I worked for this amazing theater company for 2 years in a row called Here for Now Theater in Stratford, Ontario, run by these two absolute badass women, Fiona and Siobhan, who is a graduate of the Lear. It's an incredible theater company, so small scale. Like, the shows tend to be about no longer than an hour and a half. Maybe most actors you have are 4 actors, pared down set, pared down costume, all of that. And it's just, storytelling is at its heart. It is. And they really endeavor to bring on female playwrights and female directors, which is pretty cool. And yeah, and most of the shows that they have as a part of their season are brand new. And so I worked with them for 2 years and got to do some movement directing and stage and production management. And that was it. I was like, man, I am loving this. Like, would I turn down a big Shakespeare at the Globe? Probably not. But I think that really I am super interested in telling stories that are really relevant right now. I'm interested in seeing, being a part of that process of devising, and just seeing how things change over time. And, yeah. So it's like the most convoluted, chaotic answer to your question. But I would say that, yeah, with my movement directing practice, it is all revolves around consent-based work, collaboration, um, uh, ensemble kind of at its heart, even though I do love doing one-on-ones with actors as well. But I just think that there's something for me that really lives in the ensemble that I'm just still unpicking, that's just so interesting.
I think you've explained your practice, Patrice, in a very accessible way. I know it might not feel accessible to you, but it is, like, trust me, from a person here. But I think as well, even from listening to you for this whole thing and like knowing you as a person, you are a magnificent storyteller, verbally but also non-verbally, and I think that is a big part of your practice as well. You're just an excellent storyteller.
It's just so interesting, the body is so complex and so beautiful. And speaking as someone who has, injuries that have really taken me out of the game for prolonged periods of time, and, have really made me realize how fragile this instrument is, but also how powerful it is, and that sort of resilience of the body. I mean, I've never really been drawn to text, even back in high school, sitting in Ray Colleran's class, reading Shakespeare. I was like, okay. Oh my God, sorry, Shakespeare lovers. But I just really I have always found storytelling through movement to just speak to me in a way that text doesn't. And it's probably a good thing I'm not an actor. But, also being in Sue's class, like the things that she says are so profound, and it'll just kind of like drift out of her mouth, this like profound thing that could be, etched in some concrete on the ground somewhere where millions of people see it. It like we just think that there's so many ways of telling stories that don't rely on text, that don't rely on scripts. The body says so much, it communicates so much. When it's doing nothing, it's communicating, And to me, that's so interesting. It's always been so interesting. And big thing when I was doing choreography, I would say to the dancers, I'd say, just make sure that the movement doesn't end. It's like, even if I put a hard stop in, it doesn't mean that you're stopping and then just like waiting for the next thing. It's like that hard stop still has to be alive somehow. And it's, watching those living bodies connecting with each other, breathing like on a cellular level. That's so interesting to me.
I think that's such good advice for actors who are maybe a bit nervous about movement, or they're just not used to it. Like, that's such practical good advice.
One of my like hidden skill sets is making choreography not scary for actors. I was working on the Foresight Saga with Josh Roach and troupe theater at the Park Theater last year. And I had to teach some waltzes to some actors. And, there was some fear in the room. And I was like, you're just people who lived at a time where dance was just normal. You don't have to be good at it, because they weren't professional dancers. They were just in a room dancing. They knew the dances, but you could be a little bit clumsy, or you could not be enjoying it. That doesn't matter. It's like you just have to be a person who knows the steps. And that is the bare minimum. Like, we're not trying to look like ballerinas. We're not trying to, then we would hire ballerinas. Like, we just need you to be able to like do the steps, and kind of breaking it down that way. And I really learned a lot doing Ian Brenner's classes at Central, because he just breaks it down in such a brilliant, simple way, because I think that's it. I think that we're all kind of brainwashed in the arts that like, if there's dance in a show, you have to be a magnificent dancer to do it. And that's not the actor's job.
So, Patrice, do you have any kind of upcoming work?
Well, I do actually. It's very exciting. But at the Foresight Saga, which I worked on as a movement director through attachment, actually. So Josh Roche, the director, absolutely brilliant director, and also a good friend of mine, we went on a trip, a bunch of us up to I'm going to start this part again. Yes, I do have something to announce. It's really exciting. So, the Foresight Saga, which I worked on as attachment through my program at Central, we have some exciting news. Essentially, Josh Roach, the director, he's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant director, but also a good pal of mine and my wife's best friend. And so the four of us, Josh and his wife Fiona, me and Lucy, we all went skiing in the Alps last year, as you do when you're a starving artist, sharing, our bunk beds. But he mentioned to me, he was like, oh, Patrice, like I'm directing the show and I need to teach some actors some waltzes. I was wondering if you could teach me a waltz and I could teach it to them. And I was like, well, Josh, I could just teach the waltzes. I'm like, I'm looking for attachments through school. And so I come at a really great rate of free, but it would be really great to, just have some projects upcoming. And he was like, oh yeah, great. So he asked if I wanted to be movement director. So I got to be in the room every day for this show, which was awesome, because as a movement director, that's so rare. And it did really well. I got, a bunch of 4 and 5 stars at the Park Theater, and we were all just so delighted. And then we got these calls from our producer Ashley saying that the RSC wanted to transfer. So we have an RSC transfer. We will be opening in December, early December. I think it might be 5th, Friday the 5th. That sounds right. I could open my calendar, but I'm not going to. Yeah, and so it's really exciting. I've never actually been to Stratford in England. I obviously live in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. So it's going to be so exciting. We're going to be at the Swan Theatre, Foresight Saga. It's 2 parts. The first part is Fleur, the first part's Irene, second part is Fleur. And so it's great. You actually get to see 2-hour shows. It's like, go to the first show, go have some dinner, come back. The actors they're so brilliant. They're so amazing. Incredible team, creative team. And so it's really exciting that that this is happening. I was really shocked when the producer was calling me. I literally thought, I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. Someone's like broken an ankle on stage. I have to go like rehearse someone new. And he's like, no, I'm offering you a job. It's like, oh, great, which is very exciting. So yeah, there's stuff on the horizon, which is really lovely. I guess post school, people say like, what are you gonna do like after you graduate? I'm like, what I'm already doing, live and direct, and hopefully teach. And yeah, I feel really excited for the kind of growth of these projects, for the development of these projects that so much hard work and energy and love went into, and just everyone. I've just been so lucky, I think, as a creator, that I just have worked with such incredible creative teams and actors. And, when these shows get more life, they just so deserve it.
If you had any advice to maybe artists listening who are trying to get into the industry, or to a younger self, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I'm going to start, glass half full, because I think it's you want to only go up at the end. I said this to some actors that I was working with at LIPA last year with my extraordinary wife, Lucy Jane Atkinson, who's a brilliant director. And we were working on The Sweet Science of Bruising with third-year actors. And I was just really honest with them, because it is a really tough industry. Going through the pandemic and having virtually no support, just that, you lose all your contracts, and it was an industry that was not essential. And so, I was supposed to have a very high paying year, I guess, as an artist, that then didn't happen, which happened to so many artists. So it's like you give everything to this industry. You give everything, your sweat, blood, and tears, and then in the face of a global pandemic, it can all be snatched away, and there's not much to. What am I trying to say here? Yeah, it doesn't give a lot in return, except for the love of it. And so I always tell people, I'm like, if you just don't really love it, you could be working way less hard, have much better hours, and earn a lot more money. That's some people really make it, and they do earn a living wage at this job. But for a lot of us, it is a lot of hustling, and it's a lot of insecurity, and it's a lot of fear, because if you're not employed by a theater company, on their sort of staffing, it's all freelance, and it's hard to plan for those trips around the world. It's hard to know where your next paycheck is coming from, and that's stressful. But if you do love it, if you really love it, and it's worth it to you, I think that it is just such, like, being an artist. I've had the best of days and the worst of days, but the best days are always more important, and what I think about. I think that I can't imagine myself doing anything else. And when I start to feel like I need to upskill, I do, or I take on a project that puts me out of my comfort zone, and I try something new, and I can do a lot of random, like I was a stage manager for 2 years. I'm not a great stage manager, but if your show only has 5 cues, I can definitely stage manage. But it's like, I think that if you can find a way to make this career work, and it, you really feel like you can't live without it, then you have to do it. And I always feel sad when people give up on it because they're bitter, or they're like, oh, I didn't make it so much. I think that if you literally are like, I was an actor for 10 years, and then I moved on, I did something else, great, no problem. But I always feel sad when I meet actors who are just resentful of the industry, or not just actors, artists in general. So I think that that's it. Like, I love what I do. I want to do it until, someday maybe I won't want to do it anymore, and then I'll reevaluate. But right now, it's still, even when it's hard, it's worth it. And I think that that's just something to really think about, is that it has to be worth it, because you could be making a lot more money and you could have proper days off. But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely getting better at like lowering my expectations and balancing my life, in that I like I'm so highly aware that I have to like really focus on other things that are important to me. Again, the pandemic really made me realize that. I was like, oh, I don't have any hobbies. What am I going to do? So, I really try to be better about giving myself a bit of space to breathe, because there was a time that all I was doing was working, and all I was doing was pouring everything I had into the industry. And that just wasn't healthy. Like, no one should do that for their job. You need to find moments of rest and moments to connect with your people, and to do the things that you love, whether that's traveling or just basic hobbies, or just like watching TV, just like laying on the couch and watching TV. Used to feel so guilty on a day off when all I wanted to do was watch TV. And now I'm like, nah, I've heard this.
I think that's the best advice we've had so far. And very practical and realistic and hopeful as well. If you had a magic wand, Patrice, and could get funding for the arts, bursaries, internships, and you've lived in a lot of different places, have a lot of different experience of these things, what maybe would you like to see? Or maybe, especially because for artists who can't afford to go to a big school, what can they do? Or if there's any like programs that are good that you know of, or sorry, this is going kind of into advice again. Like that thing you said earlier about like you can't do a master's in theater directing in Canada unless you have a bachelor's is insane.
Money. I used to just be so belligerent and about my like disregard for post-secondary institutions. Not because I don't think that post-secondary learning is super important and amazing, because I do. It was literally like the cash grab of it, and the sort of like that it gave, and just that I grew up in a very low income family, and all my clothes are from thrift stores. We never had enough to do all the things we wanted to do, which is okay, because we found ways of enjoying our lives without a lot of money. And I continue to choose a life that does not have a lot of money, again, because I love it. It just, you get very creative at how you navigate the world. I think that post-secondary learning is so incredible, and everybody should have access to knowledge, and to try different things and to see what works for them. I'm actually so glad that I didn't get into school right out of high school, because it meant that I had to just go live my life. I had to go pay rent and live in a new city. And I mean, I've had jobs since I was started babysitting when I was 11, which is way too young to babysit, but here we are. And then I got my first like job where I had like a pay slip, and I think it was 14. Like I've always had a job, but then to like have to move out and just try to live and learn. I just learned so much from just being in the world. And it's so interesting to me when people go high school into bachelor's, into master's, into and it's like they're not actually like going into the world for the first time until they're like 25. I'm like, whoa, that's wild. But everyone's different. And I think that education and knowledge should be not this thing that's like withheld and only available to those with a decently sized pocketbook. I am so in debt right now, everyone, just so you know. I am like $1 bajillion in debt. Like, I will be paying this off from beyond the grave. But I was speaking to a classmate, I think it was last year, and they were saying they weren't sure if they wanted to do the MFA, because it's 2 years and it would just cost that much more money. And I just kind of said, I think this is advice that my mom gave me. It's like, money comes and goes. You'll always make it. You'll always lose it. It will always come. It'll always go. Do not let that stand in the way of just like doing stuff. I mean, yes, you have to be practical. You don't want to be in debt forever and ever, but like, also, if you really want something, just find those ways to make it work. Ask for help. I spent so much of my 20s not asking for financial help from my family, because I knew that it was a lot to ask. But I've had to ask for a lot of help in the last 2 years to do this course, and I know that I am going to be richer, not literally, for doing this course. And the money, I will find the money to pay these people back. I'll find the money to pay the government of Canada back. I just think that like it's really important to try things if it is calling to you. And we don't we're not lucky enough. That I know that that sounds very privileged, because not everybody really has that ability and that access point. But, you know, sometimes I think that you have to be a little bit irresponsible to get the things that you want from life, or at least that's how I've lived. I'm definitely no, I'm not someone to look up to in this moment because, like I said, the debt. But again, it's worth it for me. It's worth it to like have some stressful years in the future, figuring out how I'm going to pay that off so that I could have this experience of being a student again. Being a student, you know, I haven't been a student in 17 years. Like, it's been a long time and it's been really hard, but it's been so amazing. I'm like already so sad about handing in my dissertation in, you know, July, because I being a student as an adult learner has been marvelous because I'm a little bit more chill than I used to be, which isn't saying a lot because I know I talk a mile a minute, but you know, I could have never done a course like this when I was 23 because I was just I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know how to be just personally. I didn't know, I wouldn't have known how to navigate any of this. And I was really bad at asking for help when I was in my early 20s, and I'm better at it now, and I definitely needed a lot of help through this time, just, you know, being a student, an international student. I already needed more support financially, emotionally. It involved asking some really big questions of what I wanted from my life and how I was going to get it and who could help me with it. But like if I was like, you know, things that I want to do, like I want to teach movement at an institution someday, and again, in Canada, you can't teach at a university without an MFA, an MA. And actually in Canada, the MA, that this course, the credits from the MA wouldn't give me enough to teach in Canada anyway. So I kind of had to do the MFA if I wanted to teach in Canada. Not to say that that's going to be where my teaching career is. Maybe it's in the UK, maybe Ireland. I don't know. Yeah. Italy. That sounds nice. The Amalfi Coast. But I also know that just I like other things I want to do. Like I do want to be an artistic director. I want to have my own theater farm someday, and I want to be able to provide residencies to people because I think residencies are amazing. And so it's like long-term big dream, you know, 50-year-old wild woman on her theater farm, you know, feeding her guests with like homemade tacos and like, you know, drinking wine at 3 p.m. and just like making sure that everybody's getting their work done. But yeah, like that is a trajectory for me. And I also knew that just like having this degree would help me. It's gonna open doors no matter what. And it's opened the doors to my brain.
I think on that end note, what we've learned is that we all need a Patrice in our lives. And in our theatre companies, in our institutions, we need a Patrice. Thank you so much, Patrice, for your knowledge, your inspirations, your kindness, your experiences, your everything. Thank you for being you, Patrice.